Welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in to this special episode. I'm going to preface this real quick. I was lucky enough to get an email about doing a special interview episode, and I've never done this before. So the way this episode is going to look, it's going to be quite different, and I'm excited to share with you. So tune in, lock in. You're going to enjoy this one.
You are now listening to the Real Table Podcast with Michael Carter.
Welcome back to another episode of the Real Table Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Carter, and this is a special episode. I don't want to say never. I was unsure of when an episode like this would happen. I remember it distinctly. I was coming out of an interview, and I looked at my phone, and I saw I got an email from an agent that said, "Hey, I have an actor for you that I want you to do an interview with. Like, what do you think about that?" And for like the last month and a half or so, we've been trying to get this interview going and trying to get it on the books and make it happen. And today we finally get to make it happen. I am super excited to be here. This again, I never expected this episode to happen as fast as it did. But I'm excited to bring Greg Allan Martin onto the Real Table Podcast. Greg, how are you doing, man?
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here. I'm doing great. I didn't know this was a first for you, so I'm flattered, I guess. I'm glad you were able to make it happen.
Yeah. So I've been doing this podcast for a little over a year now. And so I just do a bunch of movies. Yeah. And sometimes, depending on the TV shows, I do episode rundowns of TV shows and stuff like that.
Okay.
But this is something that, as I keep this podcast going, I eventually want to do. I want to bring actors, directors, other people that are in the industry, no matter how big, no matter how small. I want to bring them on and just talk to them, pick their brain, and just hear about their experiences in the industry. So, yeah, this is awesome. I'm glad that you're my first.
Thank you.
Go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Like, where are you from? Where you're born?
Sure.
And even if you feel like it, go into how you got into the industry as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've got a little bit of a unique story here.
Okay.
I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, very, middle class family. 2 brothers. We were all involved in sports. That was our big thing: football, basketball, baseball, swimming. I mean, whatever we could do. My dad was a very good athlete, but at the same time, my dad and mom were very adamant about sports. Always had to come first. It was the old adage of being a student athlete. Well, to them, the student was first. Otherwise, you didn't get to play sports. So, because of that, I had whittled it down to where I was eventually just focusing on football, and I was able to get a football scholarship to Vanderbilt, which was had a combination of not only being not too far from Little Rock, but it was also the best combination of Division I football and a great academic school. So turns out we didn't have great football teams when I was there, but I got a great education and went from that on to law school after that. And then when I came out to LA, I took a job in the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. So I was actually a DA for 30 years.
Wow.
So that's kind of the professional, and I just retired a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So that's sort of
congratulations.
the academic professional side of things. But I started acting as a kid, in school plays and church plays. When I got into college, between studies and football, there just wasn't enough time. So I shelved that passion for a while. And ironically, when I got into law school, we had a little, very amateurish, of course, a little theater company there in the law school. We did some original plays, so that rekindled that interest. Got to LA, and I eventually joined a theater company. And while I was in the DA's office, I did probably 25 plays in that theater company, the Actors Co-op. And so I just sort of kept a foot in both worlds. I couldn't pursue the acting in terms of film and TV much because
Okay.
I had a full-time job, but I was
Right.
still able to get a few things along the way, a few parts on TV shows. And then when I retired a couple of years ago, that's when I decided, okay, let's take that avocation and make it more of a vocation. So just trying to focus more on the acting now.
Nice. Wow, that is crazy. So you didn't start off as an actor. You started off with being a DA,
Right,
and then you got yourself into acting.
right. So now
That's
I'm having to compete against all those guys my age who've been
right,
acting since they were kids. They got resumes a mile long. So I'm trying to
right,
catch
right.
up now. Trying to be an overnight star in my 60s.
There you go. What was your first project?
Wow, the very first one, actually, without going into great detail, the very first thing I did was when I had finished law school. I'd moved back to Arkansas for a few months, where I was from, before coming out to California. And I worked as a stand in on a TV movie that was coming through town. Peter Strauss, who was a big actor back then, Rich Man, Poor Man. And it was sort of prescient in terms of that movie. It was called Under Siege, but it was about an attack, a terrorist attack on this nation's capital. Well,
Hmm.
the Capitol in Little Rock, Arkansas is a model of the one in DC. So that's why they shot it there.
Okay.
So I was working as his stand-in, but then they were looking for people to do some smaller parts, and so they found out that I'd done a little bit of theater and a little bit of acting. So I ended up getting a few lines in the movie, and that sort of whetted my appetite for it.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
but when I came out to LA, I think maybe the first thing I did was, wow, this is really going to date me. It was an episode of Murder She Wrote. If you remember
Yeah.
back there,
Yeah. Yeah.
Angela
Yeah.
Lansbury.
Wow, that's awesome, dude. I love that. Um, what was like your inspiration for really deciding that you wanted to pursue a career in acting? Because I feel like it's hard. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to really instill yourself in that industry. And some people, like even like the position you're in, some people never get those opportunities. So like what made you go, I want to do it. I just want to just pursue it.
Well, I didn't make that decision for a very long time. In fact, I made exactly the opposite decision. So I'm out in LA and I'm doing a lot of theater, but I have a full-time job as a DA, which that was even more of a passion for me, was
Right.
working, using my law school degree and working as a district attorney. And I love that job. Up until a point, but I don't want to get into political things right now. But I the thought crosses your mind when you're doing theater in LA and you know a lot of actors and this sort of thing. The thought crosses your mind, maybe I should do this. And I'm just so grateful that I didn't. It might have worked out if I'd made that decision, but for most people it doesn't. It's a very, very difficult thing to do, to actually
Yeah.
make a living. I forgot what the statistics are, but it's
Right.
less than 10%, I think, of the Screen Actors Guild members who actually even make a living, and that's just the
Yeah.
union members. So it's very, very
Right.
difficult to do. So, I had a family. I was raising kids. I didn't want to be desperate for how to feed my family and raise kids. So I deliberately made a decision to continue working and just enjoy theater. So it really wasn't until I decided it was time to retire that I
Mm.
thought, okay, now I can really devote myself to it. And the great thing is now is I'm retired. I had a good career. I'm not desperate. If I get work, great. If I don't, it's fine. I can still do theater. I can still, enjoy my
Yeah.
life. But it's fun to be able to do it now without that kind of need or desperation.
Yeah, I think it definitely that would make it a lot easier if people were to go out there with that intention.
Yeah.
Obviously, not everybody gets to be in that position where,
Yeah.
they're like, "Hey, I'm doing this for fun. If it happens, it happens, and it doesn't, doesn't." But
Mhm.
yeah, I definitely can see how that would make it easier. You mentioned that you had kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, how many kids do you have?
I have two boys. One just turned 28 and the other one's 21. So starting
Wow.
Started kind of late. One went to UCLA, and the other's a senior at TCU, Texas Christian University. I
Okay,
was just
okay.
online a little bit ago. It's Dad's weekend for fraternity coming up, and I was on there hunting for football tickets. So
Yeah, hey, it's football season, man. It's football
exactly.
season. Are you married as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
Okay.
actually, second marriage as of 3 years ago, and
Okay.
she actually has three boys. So we've got a basketball team between us. We got five boys. They're all in their 20s.
There you go. You can run
Yeah,
it. Go find a league, sign up,
exactly.
play
And
some
they're
pickup
spread
games.
out everywhere. But luckily, they're all good boys and doing fine.
Yep. Um, I'm gonna ask this question anyway because I feel like you kind of answered a little bit, or you hinted towards the answer of this. Um, how do you handle rejection in the industry?
Rejection? I don't understand what you're talking about. Oh man, that is yeah, that's the old joke. If you look up acting in the dictionary, it'll
Yeah.
the thesaurus will be rejection would come right along with that. Uh, well, you're right. I did answer a little bit, which is that um, I mean that's a discussion that could go on for hours because
Right.
if you're not prepared for that, you shouldn't
Mm,
even attempt to be in this business. And
yeah.
it's actually I remember when I was going back to what I was talking about thinking about maybe doing it full time. You'd read books by famous actors, and they'd always say, what one piece of advice would you give a young actor? And it was amazing how many of them said, if you can do anything else and be happy, do it. And I
Yeah.
think that's a reflection of how much rejection there is. And the hard thing is that goes right along with that is it's being rejected for things that have nothing to do with who you are as a
Right.
person, your
Right.
value. I mean, I loved being in and it's not just a legal career, it's most any career where you're valued for how smart you are, how capable
Yeah.
you are, what you bring in terms of your own values and ethics and morality and intelligence and all those kind of things come to it. Acting, it's just kind of like what you look like and whether or not you can say the line. So you're getting rejected on those kind of things. Are
Right.
you you're not pretty enough. You're too pretty, too tall, too short, too fat, whatever. All of
Yeah.
these things that have nothing to do. That's why you see it's one of the biggest truisms in this business that young kids that get screwed up because so
Yeah.
early in life they're faced every day with being valued on things that really aren't
Yeah.
important.
Yep. Yep. Wow, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Um, let's talk a little bit about like some of your projects. Like I was looking at like your resume that your agent sent over, and I said, "Wow, okay,
Hmm.
this is some nice work right here." Like you've been in the popular series Ozark on Netflix,
Yeah,
Mad Men, The Resident. I think a lot of people would be happy to hear like A Man Called Otto with Tom Hanks. Like
yeah.
that's pretty cool. What are your like between those projects? Like, what is your favorite project out of that bunch? And like, what was it like? You don't have to speak on all four if you don't want to,
Yeah,
but like, what was it like working on, you know, some of those projects, especially when you're around like people like John Hamm
sure.
or Tom Hanks,
Yeah,
Jason Bateman. Like, what was
yeah.
that like?
Yeah, and first of all, let me preface this by saying that's the difference of where I was when I was working as a DA. All of those things I was able to do while I was a DA,
Wow.
because those were all small enough parts to where I could go
Right.
in for a day or two or three
Yeah.
and just take vacation time and come back to my job.
Yeah.
Um, the difference, and we'll get to talk about Shadrach, was it was a project that took 6 weeks to film. Now, if I had had the opportunity to do something like that while I was a DA,
Yeah.
it would have been very, very difficult. Probably
Yeah.
would have had to turn it down. I mean, if it was something really major, then I would have had to, maybe take a leave of absence or quit my job or whatever. But I was never faced with that. So the first part of that is that those were 1 or 2 or 3 day jobs,
Okay.
and the main difference is when you do that, you're kind of a utility player. You show up, you know your lines, you do your job, and you leave. But
Yeah.
the good thing is uh, in those projects in particular, especially I'm thinking about Ozark and A Man Called Otto. was the opportunity to meet people. Now, A Man Called Otto, I love that for a number of reasons. One, because when I first got the audition for that, I saw the title, A Man Called Otto, and I went, wait a minute, I wonder if that is based upon one of my favorite books of all time called A Man Called Ove, Ove, a
Okay.
Swedish book by a guy named Frederick Backman, which I just love. It's such a charming, wonderful book. And sure
Yeah.
enough, it was, but they changed it to Americanize it, called A Man Called
Right.
Otto. In fact, there's a Swedish version of the movie called A Man Called Ove.
Okay.
So I was thrilled to be able to be a part of that, whatever it was.
Mm.
And it got to the set, and my scene was in a flashback when Tom Hanks is younger, who was actually played by his son in
Okay.
real life.
Wow.
I didn't get to act with him, but I did get to meet him and spend some time talking to him. And the wonderful
Yeah.
thing, and this is true about Jason Bateman as well, just
Yeah.
really nice, generous, wonderful people. And it's always delightful when you meet people at that level who are
Yes.
genuine. I'm sure not
Yes.
all actors are,
Right.
especially at that level, but he
Right.
really was. It's just what you'd expect from Tom Hanks. He's a
Yeah.
really good guy. And the Ozark one was really cool because I spent basically 5 hours just shooting a scene with myself and Jason Bateman, and he was directing that episode. He's a great director too.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was terrific. We got to spend a lot of time together, and it was the funny thing about it was this was season 1, episode 2. So when you get the audition, you hear this project, Ozark, Netflix, you're going, wow, this sounds pretty cool. But at
Right.
that time, you have no idea because you get auditions for shows sometimes. They'll do the audition and then you'll never hear about the show again. And they'll go, I
Right.
wonder what, because not everything makes it. Not everything.
Right. Right.
Probably it's only a few do. So I had no idea. And of course, probably nobody did that it was going to be the phenomenon that it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really a great thing to have been a part of that. But Jason also, just a very, very genuine, kind, terrific guy.
That's awesome. That's what you love to hear. That is what you love to hear. Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't seen A Man Called Otto, but I've heard from coworkers how great that movie is, and
Yeah.
it's on my list of things to watch when I get a chance. And I've also
I-
heard about Ozark too. So,
And I would highly recommend the book. I really would.
okay,
Great book.
all right, you heard it here first. He's recommending the book, folks. Recommending the book. All right, Greg. Let's talk about a toughish topic. I told you about this topic, and you went, "Oh, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
we're gonna go there." Let's talk about the SAG strikes. It was the talk of not just the town in Hollywood, but it was the talk of the world.
Right.
I did a few episodes, or maybe 1 or 2 episodes about it, and
Okay.
kind of educating people and letting them know like this is kind of a big deal. Like this is kind of a big deal. All of Hollywood is just shut down. First question: were you on the picket lines?
No, I was not.
Okay.
I never joined the picket lines.
Okay. I was just curious. What was it, since you weren't on the picket lines? Like, what was it like for you? Like, what was your perspective? Like, where did you sit with that? All that stuff.
Well, obviously, I was, completely on the side of not only the actors, the SAG strike, but the WGA writers strike as well.
Yes.
And obviously, I believed completely in what they were striking for because those contracts that had been signed quite some time ago were not fair for the actors or the writers. And I thoroughly applaud and am proud of what our union did to not knuckle under for that and to stand their ground until they got a good deal out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But also because of the uniqueness of my position, I will, again, retired, not dependent upon this for a living.
Right.
It didn't affect me in the same way it did a lot of people.
Yes.
It affected me because it just meant there were no auditions. There was nothing to do. I had retired and I just finished this series, and I was ready to, springboard from that into other things, and everything was just shut down, like you said, for months. So for me, it was just a level of frustration. It also meant that the project I had done, Shadrach, didn't come out for a while because everything just got stopped. They weren't
Wow.
releasing
Yeah.
anything. They couldn't promote anything. We couldn't do any publicity about it.
Hmm.
But it was difficult because I knew friends who, fellow actors, and not just actors, but writers and the people behind the scenes, crew people and craft people and
Yeah.
costumers, and on down the line. Uh, so many of those people were hurting very, very badly,
Yeah.
and some of them, lost. Not only just lost jobs temporarily, but because a lot of those jobs are peripatetic. They go from one job to another, and it's word of
Yeah.
mouth. And so it was really difficult on a lot of people. People had to move and sell their houses, and so it was devastating in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about it was I expected, and my agents and managers expected. I think a lot of actors, everybody was looking forward to. Boy, as soon as this thing gets finished, the pipeline is just going to burst because surely they've got all these projects backed up,
Right.
and that didn't happen.
Mm-mm.
And there have been a bunch of articles over the last few months in the Los Angeles Times, and the word they've used is contraction. The industry has really contracted. So
Yeah.
people are still hurting. People are really, really hurting. And again, I'm not dependent upon it.
Right.
Again, it's frustrating. I don't get as many auditions as I used to.
Yeah.
But the reasons for the strike, which you've done some episodes, so you're very familiar with it, that whole streaming model was just never going to be sustainable. They
No.
were
No. No.
pouring in so much money to the production costs of these streaming services, and relying upon just subscriptions. And it was
Right.
never, I didn't even understand it not being intimately associated with the business side of it. I just thought I'd see some of these shows,
Yeah.
the Deadwoods, the Game of Thrones, all these shows, and go, my God, how much money do they spend on that?
Right.
So that's what led to the strike, because the actors weren't getting their cuts of that.
Yeah.
And myself in particular, I mean, on Ozark, because it was a streaming show, they hadn't figured out how to do the residuals for that, how to track it. And
Mm.
so I got like very little in the way of residuals for Ozark. And for a regular network show in the old days, you'd get, residuals on a regular basis for years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So they got a lot of that settled, but now the studios and the streaming services have just contracted, and there's just not you you turn on the TV and you see tons of content, but it's
Yes.
not the way it was, and so there's just
No.
not as much opportunity out there for people. It's hard. You
Yeah.
still read those articles about how people are really struggling.
Hmm. I, it. It. I've heard. Are people also leaving L.A., Hollywood? I think I've heard that.
Yep. I mean, for quite some time, I'm sure you're familiar with this. Atlanta is a great hotbed of production.
Yes.
Has been
Oh
for many
yeah.
years. And in fact, a number of the projects that I've done have been out of Atlanta.
Okay.
So historically, even before all this hit, actors as well as other industry people have moved to the Atlanta area to get more work there. I know a
Okay.
number of my friends have moved there, but I think once the strikes hit, I think that's true. I think a lot of people have either moved to Atlanta. There's a lot going on in North Carolina and New Mexico, Texas. So there's a lot of film industry going on in other places. So yeah, people have chosen to go live someplace where the cost of living is better, and
Yeah.
hopefully more opportunity.
Yeah. Uh, Speaking of, you had friends that like moved to like Atlanta. Did you have any friends that were on the picket lines at all, or that were maybe deeper into what was going on, or no?
Yeah, I knew some actor friends who
Yeah.
would go out there every day. So
Okay.
I didn't, maybe to my bad that I didn't join them, but I was probably too busy enjoying, golf and retirement.
Hey, that sounds pretty good to me. um, there's also, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you know about this, but there's a video game strike going on too for the actors in video
Yeah,
games.
yeah,
They're striking right now,
yeah,
which is, I mean, I love it. I love it. More power to them.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
what is there anything, um is there any like is there any word of encouragement that you would have for them? Also, speaking of thinking of encouragement beyond that, also, what is your perspective like on them also just trying to go, we deserve more, we deserve better, we deserve to be paid fairly, like, oh, give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I am in favor of anything that anyone on the creative side of things that can benefit to them getting paid what they deserve, and not only that, but the protections they deserve. Because in
Yeah.
video games, as much as almost anywhere, the whole issue of AI coming in
Mm,
and using images and using voices and that sort of thing. I've got friends who are in the voiceover world, and
yeah.
a lot of them are really hurting because a lot of
Mm,
that's going to AI, and so every union is doing all it can to protect themselves, and I am completely in favor of it.
yeah. Speaking of AI, how do you think like, since it's just about everywhere, how do you think we can all use it, more properly? Like thinking about your line of work, like
Mhm.
how can Hollywood take this technology and use it to be productive and not use it to take away jobs and to, hurt other artists?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
how can they use AI for good?
Well, obviously, it has tremendous creative uses, but as with technology throughout history or industrial revolution, every time new ways of doing things come about, sometimes the people who did things the old way, get left behind. People
Yeah.
who, I mean, there are things that are done now, even before AI, that are done by computer that used to be people did by hand. Look at animation.
Yeah.
There are old time animation artists who drew things by hand, who, lost their jobs when, computer technology took over, or they found ways to adapt. So there are clearly very useful um, uh, ways that AI can be used. It's just a matter of how do you use those things
Yeah.
without um, without usurping the talents and the roles of human beings. And from an actor standpoint, that's what I can speak to the most. And it's true with
Yeah.
voiceovers as well, because that's another form of acting. Um, I do not think, maybe I'm wrong, I'm not a tech guy, but I
Yeah.
just can't imagine AI ever replicating the ability to express the kind of emotion and
Mm,
empathy
yeah.
and inner life that a human being can. So I
Hmm.
don't know that you're ever going to be able to see that. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the things you see, the deep fakes you see,
Yeah.
short videos and stuff are kind of scary.
Yes. Very
And
scary.
so the potential for harm is out there. But I just don't think uh, you're ever going to be able to replicate that in terms of really uh, serious acting ability.
Yeah.
Um, but still, at the same time, you can't just say, "Yeah, I don't think that will ever happen," because who
Right.
knows? People, we didn't know we were going to be here now.
No.
So
No.
we've
No.
got to protect the people who do this
Yep.
for a living, and I know it's tough for writers because you can put in a few prompts into a computer and say spit out a screenplay, and it's there
Yep.
in
And it's
seconds.
there. Yep.
So everybody has a right to be protected for their creative input.
Yeah. Agreed. I love that. I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
Let's get into your latest work.
Sure.
Shadrach. Let's talk about it. Can you give the audience a little inside look and inside scoop on what this project is and what is it about?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is a Sony Affirm Films production. Affirm Films is the sort of family-based division of Sony,
Yeah.
and so they were the producers of this. And it's streaming now. It's a six-part series that's streaming on Great American Pureflix, which is
Okay.
also a family streaming
Yeah.
service. Um, and you can go to pureflix.com and or you can go through Amazon Prime and find
Okay.
it and get a free trial subscription. But PureFlix has done, I think this was the fourth original series that they have produced this year. And it's basically a story about a family that is living in the big city, two parents, two kids, and the dad basically loses his company.
Hmm.
And they are forced to, and this happens in the first 5 minutes, so it's not giving much away. They're
Yeah.
forced to move from the big city to the country where the mom used to live with her parents. So basically live with the grandparents on their farm.
Yeah.
So it's a really sweet, charming, and funny, and it's got drama in it too, story about um, how you deal with change. Change is hard,
Hmm.
and how
Yeah.
you adapt. You've got three generations living together. You can imagine these two kids. It's a 10-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. And
Yeah.
the 12-year-old girl, her name's Anna in the series, played by Livy Birch, who is a wonderful, wonderful young actress. She's got a
Hmm.
huge career ahead of her. And she's sort of the heart and soul of the show because she also does some of the voiceovers at the beginning and ends of the show.
Yeah.
But in the first, you can imagine a 12-year-old girl who's taken from her school and her kids that she's friends with, and
Yeah.
the city, and she gets there in the first episode. They get to the farm, and she gets out of the car and holds up her cell phone and goes, "There's no service here." But what they find is that all three of the generations, they learn how to adapt to this.
Yeah.
They're thrown together, and that's why I say it is a show. It sounds cliche to say for the whole family, but it really is,
Yeah.
because you've got three generations, and the kids learn how to appreciate what grandma and grandpa teach them, and parents
Yeah.
who the guy's lost his job, and the mom's moved back to her hometown. She never thought she'd go back there. Grandparents are now, they were settled in their lives, and the four other family members are living with them.
Hmm.
And a lot of it's about just learning to slow down and appreciate simple values
Yeah.
and family.
I love it. I love it. I was able to watch a few clips, mostly the
Good.
clips of you, which were nice to watch. What drew you to this role of Pawpaw? Right, you play Pawpaw.
Yeah.
Yeah. What drew you to Pawpaw?
It took me a while to adjust to the fact that I was finally old enough to play a character named Paul.
Yeah,
My
for
kids
sure.
Yeah, you're old enough. Don't worry. Well, it's interesting because I mentioned I have two boys, but I do not have any grandchildren yet.
Yeah.
So, but there were a number of things. I mean, the first thing that always appeals to me as an actor is just the writing, and I just love the stories because
Yeah.
of the simple aspect of them and how sweet they were, and the characters were all very, very rich. And I don't want to give the impression that this is a preachy show or a
No.
saccharine show. I mean, it's not. I mean, this is a real family. They're dealing with stuff.
Right.
But I love the character of Paul because he's a guy he's a sort of rugged rancher who's living on this farm, and he's just sort of the wisdom in some ways. It's a
Yeah.
throwback in some ways to the old Little House on the Prairie,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But there are a couple of other elements of the script that I really love. One is that I don't want to give it away because it's part of the first episode that you come to find out that one of the things that cements the kids, especially the young girl Anna, living there and accepting it, and not just accepting it but really embracing it, is she becomes friends and very close to this majestic horse that shows up.
Hmm.
So I
Okay.
won't go into how that happened. And the horse, that's the name of the horse, Shadrach. So it's a beautiful
Wow.
story in terms of the interaction with the horse as well. But there's also something I've talked about Livy, who plays Anna. Her
Yeah.
younger brother is played by an actor named Cale Farrett, and it's in the show. It has to be in the show because it's who he is in real life. Cale suffers from a rare blood disorder called Fanconi anemia. and it's a blood disorder that affects the bone marrow, it makes you susceptible to leukemia and other
Yeah.
types of cancer. And one of the hallmarks of that is that their hands are turned inward, kind of like a claw. They have no thumbs.
Yeah.
And there's a number of other effects of that, including a possibly shortened lifespan, which I hope and pray is not the case with Caleb.
Yeah.
But that also is something that's just part of the story, and it's handled in
Mm.
such a lovely way. It's just
Yeah.
part of who this family is. They've
Yeah.
been dealing with adversity for the 10 years of his life, and now they come here and they've got to adjust to this. But they just handle it. They don't make a big deal about it. He's just part
Right.
of the family. He ends up riding the horse, and Cale, he's playing the character of Michael. And if you watch any of the episodes, Michael just has this beautiful smile and he's laughing, and he's really kind of the humor of the show in some ways. And that's how the way Cale is in real life. And it was
Wow.
it was a wonderful thing. To get back to your question, when I read about this, I thought how cool that they're
Yeah.
involving this kid with that kind of disability in the show, and they're not making
Right.
a big deal about it. It's just who
No.
they are.
Yep.
And to do that, and then to get to work with Michael was just so special. He's such a funny kid, and he has such a wicked
Oh.
sense of humor. So he was entertaining a lot of us. But so it was just a great chance to be part of a family show and see them really stress the importance of that, the importance
Yeah.
of just appreciating your family. Because nowadays, when your parents and your kids grow up and leave college and oftentimes move away, you just don't see
Mm.
them that much. It's kind of
No.
the way it is with my boys. I don't live in the same city that they do. And
Right.
then grandkids come along and you can see them on occasion or holidays or whatever, unless
Right.
you're lucky and live in the same town. So it's lovely how they just throw them all together,
Mm.
and they don't just survive it, but they thrive in the midst of it and recognize,
Mm.
wow, it's great being together with a family
Yeah.
like this.
I love that. That's amazing. Look, you you're making me right after this interview turn it on the TV and sit
Good,
down and check it
good,
out. I have to. I really
good.
have to. Uh, during filming this show, was there any moment that kind of like that you took? I mean, obviously, when it comes to acting, you have to take some elements from your real life and
Mhm.
kind of help you get into those roles and stuff. Was there any significant, and maybe it doesn't have to be a significant moment, but was there any moment throughout filming? Was there a scene that you took that you used something from your real life to really get into the role and to really
Mm,
portray what you're trying to portray?
mm, mm. I'd have to think about that because I can't think of a specific scene, but
Okay.
more in general,
Yeah,
I
go
could
for it.
I could answer that because one of the reasons I graduated from law school and I could have gone to work in a big law firm and worked 80,
Yeah.
90, 100 hours a week and that sort of thing. But I deliberately made the choice to go work in the DA's office. That I enjoyed the aspect of criminal law, but I
Yeah.
also knew that was going to afford me a more normal lifestyle. Didn't make as much money working for the government, but I deliberately wanted to do what my dad did with me, which
Mm.
was I wanted to coach my boys in every sport. I wanted to be there at every practice, at every game. I never wanted them to have to be out there playing anything where they would look up and go, "Where's my dad?" So that was
Mhm.
really important to me. And it was great to be able to, because I'm so looking forward to being a grandparent and doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But it was great to be in a family drama where I got to do that in the script. Paw, he's been the farmer, he's been the rancher, and he teaches Anna in particular about how to take care of the horse, how to ride the
Wow.
horse. So I
Yeah.
love being able to play a character that's imparting that wisdom because, uh, and it also goes to back when I was in the DA's office. And the last assignment I had in the DA's office, I worked in a juvenile courtroom. It was actually the only juvenile mental health courtroom in all of LA County, and I was the
Okay.
DA there. And one of the things that I was most struck by was the kids that came into that courtroom. Most of them had some sort of mental difficulty that they were dealing with. Not serious, debilitation, but just a number of um, mental diagnoses that they might have had that affected their delinquency. But my job as a DA was to hold them accountable for the delinquency. That's part of it.
Right.
But it was also a very collaborative environment with the defense attorneys and with the judge. Like, what do we do? What's best for these kids? But the point I'm trying to make here is that I was really struck by the fact that the most common denominator that I saw with kids that came into that courtroom, and I'm talking about white kids, black kids, Hispanic kids, whatever, we got the whole gamut, that came into that courtroom was that the vast, vast majority of them were from broken homes. Most often, the only parent that would show up in the courtroom was the mom.
Yeah.
And you really realize when you're confronted with that every day what the effect of that is. So that was something that was always sort of in the back of my mind when I was watching this show. I was going, I hope people watch this and just, recognize, take a second and recognize just how important it is to maintain those relationships and nourish those relationships in the family.
Yep. I agree. Family is super important.
Mm-hmm.
It is super important, and I'm lucky enough. I'm blessed enough where I have a solid family. My parents are still married. Me and my brother are doing well. Actually, my brother just had his second child today, and so it's like it's stuff like that where I'm like, man, yeah, thank you, I appreciate it. It makes you realize how blessed you are. So
absolutely,
yeah, family is so important.
Yeah.
Last question, and this is about actually two more questions.
Okay.
The first question is about Shadrach. For anybody that wants to watch this, why should they watch this? Why?
Everything that I've said before, of course.
Right.
So let me back up a little bit and preface that by saying that I think that there is such a need out there for the kind of entertainment that parents can watch with their kids, grandparents can watch with the parents, kids can watch their grandparents, that everybody can watch together, and nobody has to worry about the content. And again, I go back to saying this is, some people might see the name of the streaming service, Great American Pure Flix, and think it's going to be preachy, think it's going to be very cheesy, and it's not. It really is. There is a faith-based element to it, in the fact that it's just kind of like the way these people live with a kid with disabilities. Well, these people, they go to church. That's what they do, and they say grace before meals, and sometimes they'll go, let's pray about that. But it's not, you're not hit over the head with it. It's not a big deal like that. So I think that any phase of a generation is going to enjoy this, and it's been very rewarding for me. I got an email from a high school friend of mine that I had not seen in 40 years. And she wrote me and she goes, oh my gosh, we sat down with our grandkids. They were over the other day. We watched it. We all loved it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this was even more stunning to me, is that I've done a few of these interviews like this. And this particular one that I was doing, I wasn't familiar with the podcast. And it was a man and a woman who were doing the podcast, and at some point they were talking to me about it, and they were talking about the fact that they also appreciated that it was not preachy, it wasn't hitting you over the head with anything. And she mentioned, she goes, well, you're talking to two Canadian atheists here.
Wow.
No, I didn't know that. And she goes, so we were really a little hesitant to go to a serious service called Pure Flix. She goes, but you know what? We watched all 6 episodes and we love it, and we hope there's a season 2.
Wow.
I immediately emailed the public relations department at PureFlix and go, guys, you're not going to get a better review than this.
Literally, not a better review. Speaking of faith, do you have a faith?
I do.
Okay.
I'm
and Christian. I bet that helped to play into this role and to even take this role, having having a little bit, like you said, there's not a whole lot, but having a little bit of that
Yeah,
faith
yeah,
woven into the story.
absolutely. And again, this goes back to how gently they handle it.
Yeah.
There's, as I'd mentioned before, Anna, the character of Anna, the young girl, she has some voiceover that she does, and she talks
Okay.
about the horse or what happened in the episode. And at some point, I remember distinctly, she has a line where she says um, that there are a lot of surprises in life. Some of them are good, and some of them are bad, and you don't always know which is which.
Mm.
And I thought that was so profound, but I also thought that is just a very subtle way of stating what one of my favorite verses in the Bible is, Romans 8:28. All things work together for good for those
Yes.
that love the Lord. And they do that. They weave throughout just truths that don't have to be spiritual in any way, but they're just
Right.
applicable to life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a great aspect of it to me.
Yeah. I love that. I
And
have
that's why you got to watch all 6 episodes, because episode 6 ends with it's a bit of a tearjerker.
Oh, all right. Look,
Yeah,
I have a faith, and
that's
yeah,
great.
I will definitely be checking it out. I'll definitely be checking it out.
That's great.
Will there be a season 2?
We don't know. We haven't heard.
Okay.
My fear is that what I was talking about earlier, because of the contraction in the industry, is that a lot of production companies, streaming services, they don't have the money to put towards material the way they used to. And this
Yeah.
was, they definitely put money into this. I have had a lot of industry people who told me they went to this and went, wow, that thing is so beautifully shot.
Wow.
So I'm hoping and praying that there is
Yeah.
a second season, because it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger too. We don't know what's going to happen with the family. So certainly when they wrote the first season, that's what they were hoping for. But
Right.
I'm not privy to those kind of decisions.
There's nothing worse than a cliffhanger, I tell you. There is nothing worse than a cliffhanger. So
Right.
I hope that you guys get to do a season 2, because I'm going to watch this.
Great.
I want PureFlix to know this. I'm about to go watch this, and if
Good.
I get through these 6 episodes and we don't have a season 2 announced super soon, I'm gonna be pretty upset. I'm gonna tell you
All
that.
right.
I'm gonna be
Call
pretty upset.
PureFlix and make your demands. Yeah.
There it is. There it is. Last question. This is a fun
Yeah.
one. What is like your favorite movie of all time?
The only thing I don't like about that question is that my answer has become a cliche, but
Okay.
it became my favorite movie before it was a cliche. And I'll tell you a really
All
quick
right.
story. I was in law school, and this is going to date me. This was 1981 or so. And a good buddy of mine who loved old movies, he said, "Hey, let's go over to the student center tonight. There's a movie that I want you to see." So we go in and we sit and watch this movie on a big screen. I mean, it's in a little student center there. And I just went, oh my God, I love that movie. I laughed, I cried. I just thought, this is the most amazing movie I've ever seen. Cut to a few years later, and it's on every Christmas for the rest of your life. It's a Wonderful Life.
Wow.
And after I saw that movie, now this is
Yeah.
also going to date me. This was back in the days of, VCRs. In fact, I even had a Betamax. That's what I had.
Woo.
Or it became a Christmas staple. And I can't say exactly when that happened, when they showed it on TV. I would have people over every Christmas, and I'd have a big party. So you guys have to see this movie. So yeah,
Wow.
that's always been my favorite movie.
Always been your favorite. I actually think last Christmas I saw bits and pieces of it, and I'd never seen it before.
God, it is just, it's a perfect movie in so many ways. And Jimmy Stewart is just magnificent. It's just magnificent.
It's good. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, I'm honored and I appreciate this so much. This was great. Just hearing from you, I can just tell you have a lot of wisdom. You're blessed, and also you're a great human being. So thank you so much for taking time on this. What's this, Wednesday evening, and doing this interview with me. I I appreciate this so much.
Thank you, Michael. It was a real pleasure. I really enjoy what you're doing, and God bless you, and keep on doing the good work.
Thank you. And who knows, maybe if there's a season 2, maybe we got to get you back on here and we can keep talking.
There you go. I'd love that.
That'd be great. All right, guys. That's Greg Allan Martin for you, and this is Michael Carter. Thank you so much for listening to the Real Table Podcast. We will see you soon. Peace. Once again, thank y'all so much for joining me today on the Real Table Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and even comment. I want to hear your thoughts and I want to hear your opinions. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at The Real Table Pod and on Twitter at The Real Table. And don't forget to also check me out on therealtable.com for news, articles, and reviews. I will see y'all soon. Peace.